Welcome, Drink with James, episode 88. We are taking the series to a new level. We are elevating things. We are on a NetJets flight right now, back from Palm Beach. We were down there for the polo match with the Four Seasons and NetJets. I got four of our bloggers back here. Ladies, say hi. Hi. That's them. And I have a glass of champagne. I just had lobster and crab and sushi and shrimp on a plane. So for me, things are going quite well. Well, I'll say this. For any of you out there who are considering becoming a NetJets owner, let me tell you a little bit about NetJets. NetJets is not like other private aviation companies. It's fractional jet ownership. So when you become a NetJets customer, you become an owner and you actually buy a part of the plane. It's like a very elevated timeshare, but with private planes. So should you have the money to make this happen, as someone, this is maybe my, how many flights do you think I've been on, Amanda? Six? This is my sixth or seventh flight, and it shockingly gets nicer and nicer every time. And I was flying to meet them. I'm usually a Delta man, and I got shoved off onto American, which is essentially a Greyhound bus, and I was in the middle row in middle seat and 34B, and it was a total nightmare. And now I'm ensconced in luxury, and it's quite a bit better for me. So we're down for the polo. We watched it yesterday. The day before, the influencers we brought down got a polo lesson, and managed to actually be able to kind of play the game. They were moving the ball around, and they had 2 goals set up, and I was personally impressed because while I wear Stetson often, I'm not really much of a horseman, and I can't really control them, and they end up I think they sense my fear, and they capitalize on that by trying to bite me and run me into bushes. So I'm not super good on the horses. They were great. They looked great. And now NetJets is nice enough to allow us to film Drink with James on the plane. I mean, we're always trying to get free stuff from Drink with James. I am, at least. I ask the influencers all the time to send me alcohol. Doesn't happen as much as I'd like. Last year, a few resorts were kind enough to fly Tim and I out to shoot at their locations. And now we're 40,000 feet up filming this. I think that more businesses need to rally around Drink with James and allow us to do these kinds of things, so that we continue to film in ridiculous locations. With that, we'll go into questions. Well, so Insta Story highlights have been interesting. I think they've been around for a month and a half or so, and I see, pretty much every influencer now has the categories. They'll have fitness or beauty or vacations or whatever it might be. And we talked about before how, it could be a good way to help brands get a little bit more value is to, when you do a larger campaign with a brand, keeping that in your Insta Story highlights for a little bit. But they're not searchable. So so much of the value of YouTube. YouTube is the second largest search engine in the world behind Google. So much of the value there is in the ability to search, which on Insta Stories obviously you can't. But I do think that they're a good way to, especially when people are landing on your feed for the first time, they're a good way to organize it so that people can learn a little bit more about you really quickly. I just checked. I only have a couple highlights on my feed, and it looks like I've gotten in the last month 50% more views than I normally would. So I don't know how much they're being viewed. I don't know the stats yet on kind of what influencers are seeing, but on my feed, which obviously is not as heavily trafficked as an influencer's feed, I generally get around 1,000 views, 1,100 views on my stories, and the ones that I've highlighted have 1,800. So people are clicking on it, they are watching these things, but I don't think you can compare it to a YouTube video at all, because it doesn't have shareability that YouTube does. It doesn't have the virality that it does. It doesn't have the search, the SEO or the searchability that makes YouTube so great. I think like the first influencer I saw with the like icons on their profile was Mariana. I thought that was clever, and now everyone does it, and I'm kind of sick of it. I think that, I think certainly there's not a lot of stories that people create that I think you say, I want to watch that over again, or this is evergreen content that will live forever. I think those are the things that you should probably highlight is if it's something you get asked a lot that you feel like you're constantly having to answer, it's nice to just keep it in your highlight there. So like QAs and things like that, I think that's super valuable for it to go there. Any like tutorials, anything that you're teaching people, I think that's valuable. Jamie Beck does a lot of great, from Ann Street Studio, does a lot of great tutorials. I'm not sure if she has those saved in her highlights, but that feels like something that people would legitimately want to come and be able to see. There's so much value that she's providing in those Insta stories that it's nice to be able to save it. I think it's just like the things that you feel like people that will live beyond more than just that day. There's a lot of the Insta stories that you publish are fairly throwaway. They're not something that you probably need to live on for months. But those things that do, or the larger themes, if you have a certain type of photo that you take every day, if you take a mirror selfie every day of your outfit, like it's probably good to put those into a highlight as like a kind of series that you do. I find that super helpful. Some of the more just like category based stuff where you're dumping everything that, like, anytime you mention a beauty product, you dump it in there. I don't really know if that's super valuable because it just will get so long because you'll talk about beauty so much, and it's just like gets to be a bit of a mess. How do you monetize your Insta stories? Insta stories, impressions-wise, get pretty similar amount of eyeballs on it that a Instagram does. Probably 20 or 30% less on average, what I'm seeing. So there's a huge amount of value in stories, especially if you have a big feed and you are already doing a lot of sponsored content. We at FourCar, we do a good amount of campaigns now where we're just doing Insta stories because it's quite a bit cheaper, because it's easier, because influencers also are less precious with their Insta stories, because maybe you publish 5 to 20 a day depending on what you're doing. So if you think about your Instagram feed, that's 30 to 35 photos a month, and you're doing that in 2 days on Insta stories, there's just a lot more real estate there. People are like, it's a lot easier to kind of cover more brands. As far as monetizing it, I don't think you can really, unless you're huge, don't think you really can sell one Insta story. The value of an Insta story, I think, is in the series of them, a few back to back. But I definitely think that you should be trying to go out there and sell it. And when brands, if they come to you and you say, okay, I usually charge 1,000, and they say I have 500, that's a good place to be like, well, okay, I can't sell you an Instagram, but we could do something on Insta stories. So that's probably like the low-hanging fruit, easiest place to go. But it's also nice, could be an upsell on a campaign. If someone just wants an Instagram, you can say, okay, I could do that, and I'm gonna, you're probably gonna post something on stories. Oh, a little bit of turbulence. Hold, please. Yeah, if you do a sponsored Instagram, you're probably gonna cover it on stories regardless, but maybe you could roll up like a larger Insta story that spoke to some of the other key messaging of the product. You're actually using it, you're trying it on, if it's a piece of clothing, you're styling it in different looks on your stories, but you kind of have the final one that you push to in your Instagram. So I think you could use that strategically to try and upsell brands that are coming for you to just for an Instagram. So should you be using #sponsored? on gifting campaigns or if you get gifts. So I'll preface this, and I'm sure our lawyers will appreciate this, that like this is not legal advice. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not equipped to give legal advice, but I'm about to. So first of all, if you're an influencer and you haven't read the FTC guidelines on sponsored content on Instagram, you definitely should. It's fairly simple, plain speak English. There's not a lot of like legalese in there. It's easy to understand, and it's like 3 pages long. The only thing the FTC needs you to do is to divulge that you have a relationship with that brand. So, you know, if I was to stay in line with, well, for instance, at the beginning of this video, I said that, you know, NetJets was kind enough to, you know, to allow us to come on this plane and shoot this, and that we were working on a project with them. That's enough. You just have to say that you have a relationship with them. You have to, you know, if you did something gifted and you say, this brand sent me this thing to try out, that's enough for the FTC to like have you pass FTC guidelines. The safest thing is to put hashtag sponsored or hashtag ad. Hashtag spawn doesn't work. It's not a real word, so like that doesn't actually work. Partner, but you just have to make sure that like your audience knows you have a relationship in some way with that brand. The other thing, again, if you're being super compliant with FTC, which you should be, is that you have to have that on every post. So if you did 5 Insta stories in a row, it's not, frustratingly, you can't say like hashtag sponsored on the first one and then not on the rest of them. You have to have that on every single one. Now, is the FTC digging around your, you know, you have 100,000 followers, are they looking at your Insta stories to see if you're, you know, FTC compliant in your Insta story that you did on a, you know, a gift you got from a brand? Probably not. But it is worth having good habits and making sure that you don't get in hot water. I know from our standpoint, if we get knocked by the FTC, not only will we have to pay a big fine, but they ban us from being able to do sponsored content on Instagram for a certain time, 6 months or a year. So there is a world which the FTC could ban you from working with brands for a certain amount of time. So, and it's not just you, the brand will also get in trouble, which is not going to do great things for your career. If you know, cause an enormous brand to not be able to work with influencers for 6 months, not a great way to ingratiate yourself to the larger brand community. So read it. It's like 2 pages long. Maybe we'll put a link in the YouTube, in the like comment section to it, because it's a fairly simple read, and they give examples of captions that work and captions that don't work. But long story short, if somebody gives you something, that is, you do have to disclose it in some way. Look, we are, you know, starting our initial ascent soon. There is more champagne to drink. Everyone's having to be quiet right now because I'm running my mouth, so I'm going to stop doing that. Thank you to NetJets and the Four Seasons for this trip. Thank you to the influencers who came along, who completely slayed it. They will throw their Instagrams in the comments as well. You should go see the stuff they've been posting this weekend. It's fantastic. Cheers.